Stop what you're doing right now. Because what I'm about to walk you through is not a rumor. It is a timeline. And once that timeline locks into place in your mind, you will never look at this woman the same way again. She built one of the most powerful brands in television history on a single promise: be kind. 19 years. Hundreds of millions of viewers. A smile so consistent it became a logo. And then, in the span of 18 months, two people who were closest to her inner circle were dead. Her executive producer. Her former girlfriend. Both gone. Both dead. Both within months of the moment her show, and her carefully constructed public image, finally collapsed. That is not a coincidence. That is a pattern. And Rosie O'Donnell, Ellen's closest friend for 30 years, just said something nobody expected her to say out loud. Something that confirms what a lot of people have quietly been thinking. Tonight we're going all the way in. The smile. The silence. The system. And the two deaths nobody in Hollywood will talk about. This is Hollywood's smile machine. Let's go back to the beginning. Because to understand how this falls apart, you need to understand how it was built. Ellen DeGeneres ran one of the most watched daytime shows in television history for nearly 2 decades. The format was simple. Celebrities. Dancing. Surprises. Laughter. And always the same closing line. Be kind to one another. That phrase became armor. It gave her a moral identity that was almost impossible to attack without sounding like the villain. You don't go after the be kind lady. That's the whole point of the brand. But people close to Ellen, people who watched her operate up close, saw something else. And the first person to say it publicly wasn't a fired employee or an anonymous source. It was her own best friend.
I don't think it was the be kind thing that got her. I think that's simplification. But it was a lot of things, and it was complicated.
That's Rosie O'Donnell, a woman who held Ellen's newborn children, who knew her for 3 decades, and who is now quietly, carefully, pulling back the curtain on everything she's been sitting on. Rosie said Ellen's situation was complicated, and if you read between the lines of what Rosie actually says, and what she deliberately doesn't say, that word complicated is carrying a lot of weight.
Huge, kind of strange thing to be on a show like that and have all that attention on you.
19 years. And for most of those 19 years, the version of Ellen that America saw was a performance. Joe Rogan saw it before the rest of the world did. He said it felt forced. Like she was always wearing a mask.
Nice, but that people have a very poor judge of character. She doesn't seem nice. It seems forced. People that are like that all the time, she doesn't seem nice. It's very forced.
Forced. That's the word. And when the mask came off in 2020, what was underneath it was not just unpleasant. It was systemic. In the summer of 2020, a BuzzFeed News investigation dropped that changed everything. More than a dozen former Ellen Show employees went on the record. And what they described was not a bad day at the office. It was a culture of fear, racism, intimidation. People fired for taking medical leave. People fired for taking bereavement leave. Employees instructed never to speak directly to Ellen. That last one. Think about that. You work for someone every day, and you are forbidden from talking to them. That is not a television set. That is a controlled environment. Warner Brothers released a statement. Deficiencies. That was the word they chose. Deficiencies. As if racism and intimidation on a daily basis are administrative oversights. As if people losing their jobs for attending funerals is a scheduling problem.
I stay grateful and I try to stay humble, and I think that I pay attention to what is important and what is real.
Ellen said that, publicly, while her employees were describing what happened to them behind closed doors. The gap between those two statements is the whole story. In 2022, after more than 20 years on the air, The Ellen Show was canceled. The Be Kind empire had officially crumbled. And what followed in the next 6 months was not a graceful exit. It was a series of events that people are still trying to make sense of. 2 months after The Ellen Show ended, Stephen Twitch Boss was dead. Twitch was not just a DJ. He was the executive producer of The Ellen Show. He was in the room. He knew everything, every decision, every allegation, every conversation that happened on that set. He was also the most trusted face on that show. The person audiences loved. The person Ellen needed. And that last part, the trust, is exactly what allegedly made him a problem. His wife confirmed the stress. His note reportedly pointed directly at the pressure he was under. And sources close to the situation say that pressure had a specific source. Ellen wanted Twitch to go on record and publicly deny the workplace allegations. To use his credibility, the trust that audiences had in him, to repair her image. He wouldn't do it. And the pressure of being caught between what he knew and what he was being asked to say, according to those close to him, became unbearable.
We're learning more tonight about the tragic side of Stephen Twitch Boss and the detailed steps he took to hide his plans. TMZ is reporting when Twitch left his home the day before he took an Uber to a motel about a mile away. At the motel, he switched his phone to airplane mode so no one could reach him.
Of Tuesday, December 12, Twitch packed a small bag with only a change of clothes and his handgun, slipped out of his house without telling Allison, turned his phone to airplane mode so he couldn't be tracked, and took an Uber to the Oak Tree Inn, a dreary two-story motel in a hacienda-style building on heavily trafficked Ventura Boulevard, just a mile from his house.
He checked in under his own name. He never left his room. He paid $17 for a single night, and he left a note.
He reported to police that Twitch was missing shortly after he had left the house, noting with particular worry that she couldn't reach him by phone, and he had not taken his car with him when he left, two things that she said were very much out of character for him.
Out of character. That phrase matters, because the people who knew Twitch best did not see this coming from his personal life. They saw it coming from his professional one. Something happened on that show. Something he saw. Something he was asked to cover up. There were no full public details about the note. That void was filled by speculation online. But the people who were closest to the situation have been consistent. This was not random. This was connected.
There were no details about Twitch's death. People just rushed to fill that void. This was at the time when Ellen had built this edifice as the nicest person on television. She would have YouTube stars, and all of a sudden that edifice was crumbling.
Now here's where this timeline becomes almost impossible to dismiss. Before Twitch died, and Hetchy was already gone, Ellen's ex-girlfriend, a woman who, according to people close to her, was working on a documentary that was going to expose Ellen. And then, before a single frame was released, and Hetchy drove her car into a residential house at high speed, and that house caught fire. The coroner's report said she was unconscious from the moment of impact, that her death was the result of smoke inhalation and brain damage from fumes. But people who watched the aerial footage from the scene noticed something that didn't line up with that explanation.
Never sat right with me is the cross comparison between the coroner's report and the actual aerial footage. The coroner's report says that she was unconscious until her death, after just from smoke inhalation and from being brain dead from the fumes in her brain. But if you look at the footage, she sits straight up, and that takes a conscious effort.
The coroner says unconscious. The footage shows her sitting up. Those two things cannot both be true. And Rosie O'Donnell, who knew Ann personally, who had her in her home, went on record about what Ann's death did to her. And what she said is worth listening to very carefully.
Paige gets in this accident, and I'm bereft. Now, how did I know her? She did my show twice, and she and Ellen came to my home in Miami and swam in my pool, and we had lunch once. So
Right.
I knew her, not really well, but in the celebrity vernacular, and that she was with Ellen for a while, and then how her career suffered, and her book, Call Me Crazy. There was a horribly tragic child abuse in that family, and I've always sort of felt sorry for her. And she's dying, and when that all happens, I'm legitimately bereft in a way that maybe surprised me. I'd wake up in the morning and think, oh my God, something's wrong. Oh, Anne Heche is in a coma. Like, it was obsessive to me.
Rosie is describing grief that surprised even herself. And Rosie O'Donnell is not someone who cries easily or publicly. The fact that Ann's death hit her that hard, and that Rosie connects it specifically to the Ellen era, tells you something.
Twitch died 4 months after that, and I just think that that's a suspicious amount of close people around you dying.
Suspicious. That's Rosie's word. Not a tabloid headline. Not an anonymous source. The woman who knew Ellen for 30 years is on camera calling it suspicious. That is the ball game. To understand what Ellen actually is, you need to understand how she treated the one person who genuinely had her back. The one person who opened doors for her before she had any doors of her own. Rosie O'Donnell and Ellen were best friends. Real friends. The kind of close where you hold each other's newborn children, where you visit each other's homes, where you stand next to each other through coming out publicly in an industry that could have ended both their careers. Ellen came out on Rosie's show in 1996. Rosie was there. Rosie held her hand. And when Ellen's own talk show launched, using the same producers, the same format, the same blueprint that Rosie had built, Ellen never invited her on. Not once. For years.
I was never asked to go on her show. When I was, it was long after they had been on for many years, and she had the same staff as my show, the same producers, the same everything. And instead of deciding to stand next to me and hold my hand, which is what I did to her, she did the opposite. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't.
And then Ellen publicly denied that they were even friends. In an interview, on camera, she looked at someone and said she didn't know Rosie. 3 decades of friendship, erased in a sentence.
I have photos of her holding my newborn babies. I knew her for 30 years. I don't know Rosie, we're not friends. It was so upsetting to me that I had t-shirts made. I don't know Rosie, we're not friends, and I gave them out to my staff.
T-shirts. Rosie O'Donnell had t-shirts made. Because the public humiliation of being erased by your closest friend, while that friend used the blueprint you helped her build to become one of the most powerful people in television, required some kind of release valve. That's not a Hollywood beef. That is a portrait of how Ellen operates.
But she's a strange creature.
Well, we're not similar. I can say that for sure. We're not emotionally
No.
Not emotionally. Read that carefully. Rosie is not saying Ellen is difficult. She's saying Ellen does not operate on the same emotional frequency as a normal human being. She's describing someone who is performing empathy rather than feeling it. Now we get to the part of this story that broke the internet. Because this is where Ellen's timeline stops being about a canceled talk show and starts being about something much bigger. Diddy was on Ellen's show 17 different times. 17. And in her own words on camera, Ellen indicated she knew what went on at Diddy's after parties. She knew. She said it herself. Those words are on tape.
Once you get there, the party really starts.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I got you. I promise you I'm not going to let you down on this big one.
All right,
For
good.
real.
Good.
Your shoes, your feet are going to have blisters. You're going to be dancing so
Dancing so hard. Blisters on your feet. She said that to Diddy. On television. Winking at an audience that didn't yet know what those parties actually involved. Look at that clip again now, and it reads completely differently. In 2024, the FBI raided Diddy's Miami mansion. 1 month later, Ellen DeGeneres announced she was leaving the United States permanently. She and her wife packed up their Montecito estate, listed it for sale, and relocated to rural England. She said it was about Trump, and maybe that's part of it. But the timing, 1 month after the Diddy raid, is not something you can walk past without asking the obvious question.
She was quite friendly with that P. Diddy bloke, wasn't she?
Well, this is why I say release the Diddy files.
Yeah,
Release
so,
the Diddy files. Come on, Donald Trump, we want to know whose name.
So maybe she's hightailing out of there before all that is thrown at her.
That was said publicly, on camera, by someone with a platform. Release the Diddy files. Let's see whose names are in there. Ellen left 1 month after the raid. That is the sequence. Here's what you need to understand about what happened with Ellen. It did not happen in a vacuum. It happened inside a system that has been operating in Hollywood for decades. A system that powerful people have been protecting and profiting from for a very long time. Joe Rogan talked about this system years before anyone was willing to say it on a major platform. He described the arrogance, the dismissiveness, the way power was weaponized at every level of the entertainment industry.
There is an arrogance that some stars had, particularly in the 90s. When I first came to Hollywood, and this is really evident for me because I was not a star, but I was on a television show. So I got to be around a lot of stars. And there was a way that some of them would treat you. They would let you know that you are subhuman. You are below them. They would communicate with you in the most disrespectful and dismissive ways. They had power, and then when an executive would come over, they would turn on the charm. They'd be smiling and laughing, and then you would talk to them at the craft service, and they would dismiss you in the shittiest ways. I encountered a bunch of that.
Yeah.
It was commonplace. And it was, I think, a thing that they
aspired to. He's saying that cruelty was not incidental. It was the goal. It was how powerful people in Hollywood demonstrated that they had arrived. Ellen was the most visible version of this dynamic because her brand was built on the explicit opposite of it. Be kind. And then behind that camera, something else entirely. Rosie O'Donnell talked about what she witnessed with Bill Cosby, about how his behavior was brushed aside, about how the industry normalized things that should never have been normal, about how that normalization ran so deep that it infected everything, the shows, the sets, the people who ran them. And Joe Rogan, back when Harvey Weinstein's story first broke, said something that perfectly captures how this system sustains itself. Everyone knew, and everyone stayed quiet.
They say, like, in Hollywood, like, my agent's like, oh no, yeah, it's about time you got caught. I'm like, what the f? Everyone knew this?
Dude,
like, everyone knew.
Did you see his contract? It was in his contract. The way he had his contract set up was like they had a certain amount of money that he would have to pay if he had a harassment claim against him. It was like...
It was a thing for him.
Yes. Like, he had so many claims. That's like, first offense was $100,000. Second offense was $250,000. Third offense was $750,000. Fourth offense was $1 million. He had it written into his contract with Miramax. His contract with the Weinstein Company.
It was contractualized. The harassment was written into the terms of his employment. That is not a rogue predator. That is an institution that looked at predatory behavior, put a dollar amount on it, and called it a cost of doing business.
Here's the thing. He's one of many. There's got to be like a bunch of people that ran their business.
One of many. That's the sentence that matters. Because this was never just about Weinstein. And it was never just about Diddy. And it was never just about Ellen. It's about a culture that selected for this behavior. That rewarded it. That protected it at every level. And then there's the worst part of this story. The part that involves people who had no power to protect themselves. Because the system doesn't just prey on adults who got too close. Starts with children. Justin Bieber's name comes up every time the conversation turns to the mistreatment of young talent in this industry. His connection to Diddy. The parties. The documented harassment he faced as a teenager. And when that topic came up on Ellen's show, this is how she responded.
Yeah, it was pretty much like a couple days later, Scooter hit me. He was like, yo, I hate to tell you this, but your penis is on the internet. I was like, what? And so then the first thing I saw was like the censored one, and it had like the black thing over it, and I'm like, oh my goodness. Like, I don't know what this is gonna look like.
I'm no expert, but I heard that it was good.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
She said that to a teenager whose private images had been leaked without his consent, and the audience laughed, and Ellen smiled, and the camera kept rolling. That is who was running the Be Kind show, and Bieber is not an isolated case. Joe Rogan talked about the pattern that runs through the child actor pipeline, about agents and managers who treat access to children like a transaction.
Hollywood managers who manage kids, it's a racket, man.
You know what Sturgill Simpson told me? He said the same thing exists in music.
What?
He said in music there's a bunch of pedos and pederasts
For sure.
in music as well.
The entertainment business all the way through. Music, this was about. This is about music and movies and TV. It's about the whole entertainment business.
Women and kids.
Mostly kids.
Mostly kids. And almost a decade after Rogan said those words on his podcast, the truth about Diddy and Harvey Weinstein came out. All of it. Proven. In federal court. Everything he described, confirmed. Now here is the most recent chapter. And it is the one that should make every person paying attention stop and ask a very specific question. After leaving the United States, after going quiet, after two people in her inner circle died under circumstances that the people closest to both of them call suspicious, Ellen DeGeneres announced that she is planning to come back. Read that again. Ellen announces a comeback. Diddy files for early release. Both happen at the same time, after both of them went quiet, after the FBI investigation, after the raids, after the files, and the people online, the ones who have been watching this timeline unfold in real time, are not subtle about what they think.
She sounded so sincere, didn't she?
Very
she could
sincere.
Virtually choke on her words. Best one for me is Ellen DeGeneres, who is, by the way, a very nasty person. I've had dealings with her in Australia.
Bit of
could I tell you some stories about that cow? But anyway, good riddance to her. But she was quite friendly with that P. Diddy bloke, wasn't she?
Nasty. Friendly with Diddy. That's the combination people keep coming back to. Not one or the other. Both. At the same time. For 17 appearances. With Ellen on record saying she knew what went on at those parties. Let me tell you what all of this looks like when you zoom all the way out. There is a system. It has been running for a very long time. It uses niceness as currency. It gives powerful people a brand, a persona, that makes them impossible to attack without sounding unreasonable. Be kind. Be positive. Be inspiring. And then behind that brand, it operates on fear, on silence, and on the understanding that certain things will never be said out loud. Ellen spent 19 years telling you she was the nicest person on television. Meanwhile, her employees were describing a workplace so hostile that people lost their jobs for going to funerals. Meanwhile, she was photographed with Diddy 17 times, and told you she knew what happened at his after-parties. Twitch knew what happened on that set. He wouldn't lie about it. And 2 months after Ellen's show ended, he was gone. And Hetchy was building a documentary that was going to expose Ellen. And before a single frame was released, she drove into a house at speed, and the house caught fire. And the coroner's report doesn't match the aerial footage. Rosie O'Donnell, Ellen's closest friend for 30 years, is on camera calling the death suspicious. Joe Rogan saw the forced mask years before anyone else said it. And the people who have spent years covering the entertainment industry keep returning to the same conclusion. The files are out there. Not all of them. Not the ones that matter most. But enough to see the shape of what's underneath. Ellen is not in the United States right now. 2 people who were closest to her inner circle are dead. Diddy, who appeared on her show 17 times, is in federal custody. And Ellen announced a comeback the same week Diddy filed for early release. That is not the behavior of someone with nothing to hide. That is the behavior of someone who is watching which direction the wind is blowing, and positioning accordingly. If you think the public deserves the full story, share this. Because this story is not finished. Not even close. The question nobody in Hollywood wants to answer is a simple one. How many more people have to disappear, or die under circumstances their closest friends call suspicious, before someone in a position of actual power decides to look? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If this gave you something new to think about, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We are not done here.